Thank you all for joining us for today's June 10th CALS workshop on headlines and excerpts. We are hearing from Dylan Ford today. And for those of you who are longtime members of the university community, Dylan may be a longtime familiar face since she joined us from Comm and News Services early last year in 2020. And Dylan is the magazine editor, so the CALS magazine editor. She is used to writing headlines since journalism class in high school and continues to enjoy the creativity that comes with headline writing even today, and she is still learning. So thanks to Dylan for leading today's workshop, and take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to say that even though I've been doing this since high school, which for me is a long time, as you might guess, I don't have it all figured out today. So we're going to use some wisdom of the crowd today. We're going to look at things together, and we're going to make it as interactive as possible over Zoom. So please go along with me, and we will try to have a good time with this and play with words a little bit, which is something that I really enjoy doing. We asked originally, when you were signing up for the workshop, if you might share a favorite headline and if you were willing to share a headline that needed some workshopping from the group. Did anybody have a favorite headline that they wanted to share? Okay, we have one workshop example. Thank you, Megan, for submitting that. And Margaret, I think we've got some ideas from you, so we'll see how we do on time. And we may extend our brainstorming a little bit after the session if we get going well. Well, I thought we might need some headlines to discuss. So I picked out some that I've seen lately. And these headlines are not the most catchy or the most newsworthy headlines I've seen lately, but they're good headlines. And I wanted to share them with you because they're representative of some of the kinds of work that we do every day. It's not the big flashy picture or the news part of this that struck me. It's the creativity and the way the information is presented. So what I'd like to do is show you some headlines. I think we've got 3 or 4, and I want to get your reaction. So positive or negative. And how I'd like you to share that is to type a comment into the chat, whether you like it, don't like it, and then I will call on you so we don't talk over each other. Okay, makes sense? Let's try it. So here's my first headline. And this one is a pandemic kind of story. Margaret Huffman, I'm looking at you. We've probably written some stories along this line, both of us. And it's New York Times, so you don't have to like it. I'm just sharing it. So tell me what you do or don't like about this. And Janine, I'll let you read a couple of, let's see if I can get to the chat. Here we go. Okay, Margaret, you like it? Comes across as bad news, Caroline says. Charlotte Glenn says, I like the directness. Okay, Megan, I think you're onto something. You're saying it makes you want to know more. So one of the functions of a headline is to get us to read more of the story, look at more of the story. I like it, Alice, you said it captures some emotion for you, exasperated and dramatic, okay? So Alice, I'm curious, what would you think had been on that shelf?
I was just thinking back to early in the pandemic when all of a sudden there was like no toilet paper and there was no flour and like no sugar and no yeast because everybody was suddenly going to make bread. And like, you were just like, all these people ain't going to make bread. Because that's how you felt, you know what I mean? When you were in the store with your homemade mask, you know, so I kind of appreciate you know, that capturing that moment in time. It didn't, and looking back, it didn't last that long, but that's how it felt. Like, why are we out of everything? So I appreciate the kind of authenticity of it.
Okay, the emotion. Justin, you're saying it's relatable and timely. So it's a shared experience that we've all had. So this is pretty widespread. We remember it. We probably will be telling our grandchildren stories about this someday, I'm sure. Okay, so feeling and emotion is coming through in this one. Margaret, I've got a question for you. What words are not in there that your experts in ag econ might use?
Well, everything is kind of vague. I'm just kind of talking out loud here because I'm not sure, but everything is so vague. But I like the use of the word everything. So, you know, if we were writing for our department, we would probably have a specific commodity or something more specific. This is more vague, but it kind of reflects to me how we're running out of the most random things. If I was writing this headline or in the excerpt, I would probably use the word supply chain.
That's what I'm looking for.
What our experts in our department are focusing on. So that's the only probably change I would make there. That's really obvious to me.
Right. I think that's what caught my attention about this headline, because I did write a story like this, and I think I used the word food supply chain. I think I used that. They didn't use this. Now, why did they make that choice? The New York Times is not afraid of long words or lofty vocabulary at all. They're probably the only publication to use the word schadenfreude on a regular basis. So they're not afraid of using big words. They like to think that their readers are smart, but they might have chosen those words because they wanted to avoid supply chain and because they were trying to capture some of that emotion that you guys are picking up on. Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, and the negative feeling, that is emotion. So it's negative. If we're fixing it, then that might be a different kind of headline, right? Or if it's getting better, then we might want to change the tone of it a little bit. I agree that it feels negative. I find it interesting that they avoided the word supply chain. So these are all choices that you make. And I'm sure they tested this out and tried it. And they probably have different versions of this headline in different sections digitally.
Delynn, do you think it would make good sense to put the word supply chain or use the term in the excerpt there that's below the headline?
I like the word inventory because I can understand what an inventory is. That means, hey, you've got some extra of that in the back. I might have an inventory of my toilet paper that I stashed for the pandemic in my pantry. So I like the word inventory. It made me read it because it didn't have that word in it. It was hitting me on more of an emotional level. So it's not a perfect line. I might rework the excerpt and write it differently, like Margaret. I think it's not perfect, and there is no perfect headline. I don't have all the secrets, and neither do people who get paid a lot more than we do to write terrific headlines. So
I wonder if maybe they were sensing a burnout in people's interest in supply chains and how it works, and they wanted to do something a little bit different that was a little less technical.
Right. I think that's probably it. And Dee has a point. The supply chain might work better for SEO, but it's boring. So there again, it's a trade-off. Am I going to catch your attention? Am I going to read more of this story? I might read more of this story just because they get points for giving me different words to think about a different approach to the story. Okay, so we've got that one. Let's try another one. Okay, does this get you? What do you think about this one? No. Okay, I appreciate that, Pam. Yeah, this is a really famous headline. Charlotte's got it. Phrasing it as a question catches your attention. So they've got it. They've got it positioned as you take a stand on this, you get involved. Would I squish it? Would I not? That big a spider, I love entomologists, but I don't know that spider and I could live in the same space. So this is working along with the visual. And spiders are something that people have strong opinions about. So one basic way to think of a headline is that you can think of the headline as a problem or a question, and maybe your excerpt as your answer or your solution. So that's one way to think of it, so you don't repeat the same information quite in the same way. I don't think that's a perfect headline, but I need to tell you a secret about that headline. That story has gotten millions and millions and millions of clicks. It has been translated into 3 languages. The folks at The Conversation, which is a site that shares stories written by academics, I think largely because of this story and a couple of others, they have been on our doorstep asking our faculty to write more. And Matt Bertone has great pictures. He's an interesting fellow. He knows lots of information about arachnids and insects. And this is a personal piece that he wrote. So he's trying to argue that there's an ecological reason for spiders to be around, that they won't harm you in your home and that you should let them do their job in peace. And so he can make that case as an entomologist. And it's intriguing enough to say, you know, why should I not? If it had been me, I probably would have made some bad decisions here. I might have chosen the word squish. I might have chosen something with spidey sense, or, you know, something with a play on words. I think this is not a bad way to do it, to pose it as a question, because it gets you involved in this decision. Janine, I agree. It is written like what somebody would search in Google. It's a very natural, conversational.
I dropped a link to another conversation article just because we're talking about the conversation. We've had some faculty members be invited, or maybe they just wrote the articles on their own, kind of like you were saying. And I've just popped a link in if we want to look at that headline too.
Okay, so another thing, this is a why, how, that's what we're looking at here. So sometimes those words, who, what, where, why, when, those question words can be good starts for headlines. Okay. Just a quick aside about the conversation. If you're looking, if folks want to be opinion leaders, if they want to have some practice writing, the conversation shares all of these things, sometimes through the Associated Press wire and through other, and they can get pretty good amounts of hits. Matt Bertone's is abnormal, but frankly, people love insects and bugs and spiders, and they're creeped out by them and they're fascinated by them. So another cautionary thing I would say to you is sometimes it's not the headline that makes the difference. Sometimes it's the topic. Sometimes it's an amazing photo, and definitely you should use those things. We should write about interesting stuff. We should use grabby photos. We should make this as interesting as we possibly can, but your headline is not going to always be the thing that is the difference maker. So if that takes a little pressure off, that's a good thing to keep in mind. Thank you, Margaret, for sharing that. It's if you have questions about the conversation, yeah, please reach out. We would be glad to help your faculty pitch an idea. And when they work with a conversation, they're working with experienced journalists. So they will generally get to a good headline and a nice focused story. And they work almost in live time, crafting the story and taking and rejecting suggestions. It's a really interesting process, so worth doing. Okay. All right. What about, I won't say dirt, because I know people hate that word and think it's really imprecise. What do you think about this one, guys? Okay. Yeah, I don't know about the punctuation question. Justin would like it to be more focused. Emotion again. So life and death. This is a life and death issue. That's a different take on soil. I like it, I think. Yeah. I'll tell you what I liked about it. I like the word choices in a teaser text. It's a little poetic. It might be a little non-specific for some of us, but I liked the way that they set the problem up and they talked about, hey, some growers have a solution. So we're ending on a more hopeful note that might pull you into the story. Okay. Jennifer's saying the headlines have been instructive, how and should, maybe better to say why they bring life or where it went. Good point. We are in the business of having experts and having them share research with us, wisdom with us, experience. So that's a good point. Yeah. Whether to use a colon in a headline. Alice, that's a really good question. Working at a university, I feel like everything is a thesis or dissertation title, that we start out with a kicker or an idea. I did it obviously in the title for this workshop with opening lines. So I'm not above using that for sure. But sometimes a strong verb would be a better choice than a really long headline. Sometimes really long headlines work. I was looking at NPR, which we'll get to in just a moment, and they must write the longest headlines ever. They must know it works for SEO. They must have listeners who really like long headlines. That is their style. And so when you go to their site, you're going to see a lot of headlines that are fairly long. So the inner child, the dirtiness, the getting your hands into something, there's kind of a sensory part to this headline, right? Who doesn't remember maybe playing in the mud or getting really dirty? And I think this could be a good setup to get people interested in the topic. This is the BBC. As I remember, the story breaks things down pretty well. So this is all about getting you interested. The teaser text that I've typed in there came from kind of scrolling through, and it was this transparent look, and it was very, it was a fancy setup, but I liked the text, so I typed it in. Got to get your hands dirty. And maybe our soil scientists are getting their hands dirty saving the world, or maybe there's some cool connection. Follow the Food, I think, is part of a series that they have with the BBC, but I'm not a regular reader of their website. So yeah, I think that's what it is. Okay. But the idea that that soils are in trouble and this is an issue, there again, this is not a screaming headline, but this is an issue, which is something that we also have valuable commentary to share because of our experts. Okay, now here's a fun one. Speaking of making things sexy, here's a headline that goes for sexy. So tell me what you think about this one. Maybe a little too much. It's a judgment call. It made me laugh the first time I saw it. So I always appreciate something that makes me smile or laugh. Gets a little bit there. I like what Caroline said. It does grab folks who are not gardeners. So if you're not into this regularly, this might appeal to you. Yeah, Julie's right. A pun is best if it's simple. I have a confession to make. I like puns, and sometimes I like bad puns, and it's a moral failing. I know that. And people like Brent Winter and other folks who are really good editors across campus would say that that's not acceptable. I happen to like them sometimes, and sometimes they make me laugh. Okay, so we're trying to personify the trees, anthropomorphize them, whatever term you want to use. We're trying to draw a parallel with something we can relate to. Oh, thank you, Julie. It makes me happy that you like me in spite of the fact that I like puns. Now, they really committed to this, you have to say. They went with this thing all the way through the teaser and into the lead, which I happen to like. In love, timing is everything, the saying goes. The same is true for fruit and nut orchards in California's Central Valley. That is the connection I would not have made, and I think it's a creative one. I did see that, like all of us, they probably have shorter versions of this headline floating around for SEO and online. And one of them, it was something like, warmer winters are, interrupting or stopping nut trees or something like that. It was much more generic. And here's what we're doing to help. So there was a more solution-focused, basic kind of headline floating out there, but I can't remember it, of course, because it wasn't as memorable as this one. Sex life of plants is overused? Sometimes, sometimes. That is absolutely true. I'm curious as to, Charlotte, what's your position on how much we should try to make things really interesting to get folks interested in gardening or in growing things?
I think it is important. And I used to, when I was an agent in New Hanover County for some years, and I used to write an article and send it to the local newspaper, and they would often change my titles, but I always learned something from how they changed my titles. They would make them a lot more relatable to people who weren't already, gardeners or knowledgeable in the terminology. So I think definitely for capturing the interest of the people who aren't already really into it, or people who are just kind of more casual plant keepers, or whatever the terminology is today. I know that the term being a gardener is kind of out, and people want to be plant parents or something like that. So I do, especially when you're going for a broader audience. I think it's important to kind of go with some of the feel of the titles we've seen that aren't too specific or too technical term heavy.
Right, and it's kind of knowing where that line is, and I'm sure that's a matter of taste and probably also experimenting a little bit with your audience. On a related note, Deborah just posted something about the fungus that's making cicadas sex crazy. There you go, another one. They seem to like that a lot. Extension Master Plant Parents, that could be a new title, you never know. I saw one, I think it was from a newspaper in the Midwest, and it was about composting with worms, vermiculture, which we have an expert on. And they positioned the worms as like a pet that would help you compost. And I, along the line of plant parents, I would not have thought about keeping worms as a pet. So a 50-pound hound, yes. Worms, it had not occurred to me. So another way of positioning that. Okay, so I think we can go a little bit too far. Even that New York Times headline we looked at with the "we're out of everything," that's a little bit of an exaggeration, right? But we tolerated it because we got what the impact was for all of us. So you could say, oh, that's a little bit of hyperbole, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. And with this one, you could say, I think they're trying too hard, or you could smile and enjoy it, but it might get you to look at it more. Okay, so out of this, any observations about things that might help you when you're trying your next headline? I want us to talk a little bit about what makes a good headline. So I have some ideas about that based on what we've seen, and I want to get more more input from you on what works for you in terms of headlines. So to me, as Charlotte was talking about, I've worked as a journalist. I've worked in newspapers and worked for the Associated Press. You have to always, always, always be accurate about the story. And some of you I know are going to be disappointed because you were looking for a formula that will always result in a headline that gets tons of clicks and makes everybody do exactly what you want to after you see the story. I don't have that, and I don't want to do that because I think it removes a lot of the room for creativity. I think also styles change and things get overused. I tend to avoid things that are super clickbait headlines because I'm thinking it can't be that good. And often I click on the headline and the story's not very good. So we want to have good quality information. We're working for a university, for extension. We want to be a source of reputable information. So I don't want to go down that clickbait sort of hole. Can we steal a few tips and techniques from that? Absolutely. Can we be creative? Of course. D says that it should reflect what the story's about and spark interest. Okay. Probably AI. I am sure that if you Google that, you can find marketing columns, because I found a few of them that purport to tell you the 20 words you should have in your headline or the 3 ways to get everybody to click on your story. I read them and I didn't agree, or I didn't find much need there. So, all right. So to me, these are my bad bricks. I apologize to those of you with graphic experience in the group, but it has to be accurate. It has to capture the story. And I think that it's important that it's not at odds with the tone of the story. So if you have a very serious story, and I'm kind of a smart aleck sometimes headline ideas just pop out. If I have something that's not serious and I have a serious story, those two things don't go together. I've got to think about the tone, right? I've got to think about how those things match up and what should work together. So it has to be accurate, it has to capture the story. We want it to be effective. The main job is to try to get you to read more and learn more, or perhaps take an action that we mentioned in the story. You get bonus points if it's creative. It can actually make the story better. It can get more people to read the story. It can't do everything. And then if there's an emotional connection, if you laugh or if you cringe or if you feel sad, if it conveys emotion, that's pretty powerful as a headline, right? So yeah, I think tone is really important for me, that the tone of the story and the tone of the headline are not different. I also think it's important to remember, I love working with graphic designers because they will really make you aware of your limitations as a writer. A dear friend of mine from another university told me when we were putting together magazine stories there, oh, okay, well, let me know when you get that boring gray text done and I'll just pop it right in the layout. So don't forget the power of, I am a boring gray text person, as you can tell. I think it's really important that we remember that a great story might involve a beautiful photo, a sparkling headline, a great excerpt, a strong lead, great information, call to action related information there. So it's all of a piece. And if you can make all of those elements work together, it's more than just the headline, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay, so I have a few ideas for you. I'd like to do a better job of writing headlines almost every day. Sometimes I feel like I get there, some days I don't. I found a few things that work for me that I want to share with you. There are 4, and I want to get your ideas of other things that work for you. And then I want to talk about the moment where you don't have time and you're panicked and you have no ideas, and some quick things to try then, okay? So these are some things that I've discovered work for me. A friend of mine's famous saying is take time. Now I realize we're on deadlines. We have lots of things to do. So one thing I've learned from Kristen, from working with her, is every time she does a story, the first thing up at the top is the excerpt. She starts thinking about how she's going to position that story right at the very beginning. So there's excerpt and headline. And that gives you more time mentally to invest in getting that written. So even just doing that psychologically, putting that right up at the top of your story will get you thinking about, how do I do this better? The other thing is, if you have time, if you can sleep on it, that's a Patty Mercer tip. Sometimes you'll come up with a better idea the next day. It's worth trying. If you don't have time to do that, take a simple break. Look at the story, go do something different. Answer an email, make a cup of tea for yourself, walk up and down the stairs if you're in Butler. Do something just to switch your brain off of that directly, and then come back to it a few minutes later. Sometimes our brains will keep working on things even when they're not right in front of us, or we're not just staring at the screen. So try that, just switch your attention briefly, take a walk if you've got a moment, and try coming back to it. If you're really stuck or stressed, it's a bad way to create something that you're going to be proud of. So give yourself time to take a breath and come back to it. One thing that I really miss about being with my colleagues at work in the building is that I find it helpful to tell my story out loud. You've all heard about the elevator speech. What would you tell somebody? The elevator door is closing. What's the most important thing to say? Well, when I was a science writer, I would often do kind of a version of that. I would come back from talking to a scientist and I would go into somebody's doorway and they'd look up and they'd say, "Oh, how'd it go?" And I'd be like, "They told me this." And I would try to come up with a really brief explanation of what I just heard that was catchy. And I'd try to encapsulate what that interview was. If I was good, maybe they'd look up from their work. If not, I had to go back to my office and keep trying. But saying something out loud makes you shorten it, makes you choose simpler words, makes you think about, hey, is this gonna touch somebody? Is this gonna grab them? Can I get their interest for just a moment? For a while, when I had a 16-year-old in the office, it was really, really good practice because she wasn't impressed by anything. The one exception to that was when we dropped 50 pounds of silly putty off the bill, off the DHL. Why didn't you take me? So if you have somebody that you can talk to out loud, try saying what your story is out loud. That will help you shorten it up. Multiple ideas. Don't go with just one thing. Try something. If it's good enough, it's good enough, but try something different. Like the New York Times example, try one that doesn't use supply chain. Try one that has a different tone to it. Challenge yourself by leaving out a word or using a different way of describing what's going on. Sometimes you'll get an interesting thing that happens where you'll have a couple of headlines and you'll like parts of them and they'll fit together, and you'll see that. And of course, crowdsourcing, if you're lucky enough to work with someone else or to have an editing process where your story goes through other people, of course, take advantage of that. Sometimes people have a flash of inspiration and they can really help you out. I rely on Chris for that. Justin is great at that. So many of my colleagues have skills in seeing good headlines. So I'm curious, what are things that help you guys stay creative or that help you when you're struggling?
So I kind of rely on a crutch of like alliteration. When I'm really stuck, I'll just try and do, I'll use that one if I can't think of anything else. And that usually helps me get unstuck a little bit.
Okay. That is definitely something that you can try. We've got a list of some. Charlotte takes a break or takes a walk. Yeah, my daughter was April's saying she talks to her kids about what she's doing, gets good feedback that way. Until my kid became a student who studied science in college, she was a really good person to bounce things off of, and now not so much. Deborah says going outside. There's definitely something about even going out onto your porch or just walking outside in the sunlight that can change where you're at creatively. Well, to build on what you were saying, so you're stuck. This is my least favorite situation, but about to post your story, you don't have an excerpt, you don't really like your headline, and you got to post something anyway because it's got to go up today. You got other things to do. People are waiting. So what do? Here's some ideas, and I would love for people to come up with other ones. And guess what's in here? Alliteration. So Q&A, like we were saying, if a headline might be positioned as question and then teaser or story or lead is answer, ask a question: how, why, when, where, who. Come up with a question, and you can either state it or you can ask it. Everybody loves secrets. We like to be let in on secrets. We like to hear from the experts. We like to feel like we've got the inside story. Well, we work for a university, so we've got lots of experts, and they should be telling us, the inside story on stuff we need to know. So think about positioning it that way. What secret can you share? What insight can you give? Simple words. So get rid of the jargon. Banish the term that the story is about from your headline and see what comes out. See if something different comes out. Strong verbs, they help any aspect of writing, especially headlines, leads, just any aspect of writing. So look at your verbs. What's happening in your headline? If you can't think of anything, close your eyes and think about how you would describe what you're writing about. Now, this doesn't work so well for supply chains. Maybe the bare shelves picture gets there a little bit, but say you're writing about blueberries. Say you're writing about something that smells, good or bad. You're writing about food. You're writing about gardening. You're getting your hands in the dirt. If you're writing about any of those things, there's a sensory element to it. Think about using that description as you're writing. So numbers, it's a gimmick, but it works. Everybody wants to know your top 10 or your 3 secrets or your 5 ways to make your headlines more creative, whatever it might be. I'm not good at this one, but wow, there's some really good stuff that can come out of it. Books and movie tie-ins. Caveat, this doesn't work all the time. It's got to be something that's well known or that's recognized enough that it doesn't miss a bunch of readers. So I'm not a big movie watcher, so I'm a little cautious with that one because my references might be dated or they might not be well known. Alliteration, quotes. If there's something really strong that's said in the story, or if it's a decision maker or an opinion maker, you can pull that up either into the teaser text or into the headline itself if it's strong enough. So think about, is there a really strong quote in the story? The last one is kind of stuff that either comes to me in a flash, I don't know how it works for you, or doesn't happen. But if you hear a great pun, or if there's a chance to make something rhyme, or if you can use a figure of speech in a creative way, go for it. As long as it doesn't violate the tone of the story, or as long as it doesn't treat something that's serious too lightly. I'm a pun person, so usually that's something that just kind of pops out of my mouth or into my head, and something that happens in crowdsourcing pretty often. So don't overuse it. If it comes to you and it's creative, go for it. Okay. So now we're going to try some ideas using what we've learned, and we'll be glad to share. There's not a lot of information in the slides. It's just to remind you. I'm kind of reminding you of things that you already know. So here is a challenge for the group. So Megan asked for a new way of writing about berries. And I've written a few berry stories. I'll probably write a few more. Megan, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what frustrates you and what you would like help with?
Sure. What I said was that, again, kind of leaning on alliteration, we've done a lot of building a better berry. In this case, it wasn't just blueberries, it was blueberries and cranberries. And in the past, Justin may have done building a better broccoli. So there's been a lot of how to talk about the genetic or genomic improvements toward quality or nutritional value of fruits and vegetables, and how the research is pushing that forward.
Okay, so this is something that you're writing about over the long term, something that you write about often. Something that you get bored with a little bit?
Well, that's one of the challenges is like, okay, where's the new angle?
Mhm, mhm.
And especially from even just this week, the okay, everyone can probably relate to this. So I think Dee had an article in the internal CALS news about like 5 fast blueberry facts or something. And she mentioned like the Plants for Human Health Institute has does blueberry research and called out Marianne Lala, who's one of our faculty, and linked to a video of her, a very well done video of her talking about like the health benefits of berries. And one of our faculty reached out and said, why didn't this article include vac cap? Well, for starters, maybe I should just ask a show of hands. Do any of y'all know what vac cap is? Right. Okay. And so, of course, it's the most important thing in his world. And it is a very large USDA grant, Vaccinium cap grant. And it is actually sort of, that they're looking at blueberry and cranberry and improving fruit quality. And I was like, for starters, I saw that article the same time you did. Like, it didn't come through me, it came from CALS. And like it's fine. Like if you've got something to tell me about VATCAP, then let's talk about it. Like tell me what's the thing that you can share that's the new angle. What's the discovery? What's the thing? And it was very, he's in his world, and I'm doing the communication things, and we're like, okay, but we each have our specialty, and we have to respect that there's some nuances that we're not appreciating right now. So.
And you mentioned that challenge of getting all the credentials and locations in. You're going to talk about the Plants for Human Institute in Kannapolis, and then you're going to have a tie into the academic departments. And Caroline's also saying, we're trying to put the name of our group, and we have a whole style guide that I learned about when I was doing a magazine article for Master Gardener volunteers and for that program, and how we use them correctly. And it can really interrupt the flow of your prose. It can really make you feel stuck, because you're like, I've got to work in this really long thing. How do I do that? So one thing that helps is if you can, I like the fact that you reached out and you said, hey, let's talk about the importance of that, not just about the grant. You can link to that project if there's a site for it. You can get to that much later in the story. You can link to a related story, perhaps, in that post. I think it depends on which group you're trying to reach, what might be appropriate. So let's say we're writing a newsletter article for people who read about economics. They're probably going to want your supply chain headline, and they're probably going to want the technical terms. For people who might not be familiar with something, it's better to use the simpler words. So another conversation you could have, Megan and Caroline, is who is this for? Is this group going to be familiar with these acronyms or these projects? And if we don't think that they might, or if most of them aren't, then always go to explaining and to keeping it simple, okay? So let's come up with some new ideas for Megan about berries. All right, let's crowdsource here. What other ways could we approach it? Let's try not using the word berry in the headline. What might that look like?
So are you asking like what words could be used instead?
Absolutely. You can type them in, or you can
like,
say them out loud. Superfruit. Okay, that's good. All right. Caroline just messaged me. Feel free to share with the whole group. Okay. Tasty antioxidants. Okay. So there's a more basic word that we're getting at. Something with nutrition, maybe? Because Plants for Human Health is not just berries, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Summer Sweets Delights. Ooh, I like delight. Blue Gems. That's a nice picture. Nutritional boost and industry growth. What are the end benefits? Justin says. Okay. I'm thinking about a metaphor. I'm thinking about Skittles and Taste the Rainbow. Deborah and I are on a similar track, nature's candy. I'm thinking about, your color wheel for a healthy diet, or your color wheel for the best summer fruit, or a palette, or painting, or art. That's just something that occurs to me as an idea that might be fun to play with. So I'll type that in.
I guess, how about the scientific nature as far as, whether it's looking at the genetic piece of it, or breeding, or research on, or the other side of it.
Okay. Could you do it from an end user perspective? Let's say that a few weeks ago, I was slicing up strawberries to put on my morning bowl of Cheerios. What's different about those strawberries that scientists have done? Or eating my blueberries as an afternoon snack. What's different? What has breeding and research and genetics and genomics done for what I'm eating? That would be another way to approach it. Ooh, the science of dessert. That's nice. Blueberries are better than ever. I like that one. Science behind superfruits. Oh, we got some alliteration and we got cool stuff going. Okay. Justin's looking at it from more of an industry viewpoint of the people who are growing and producing the fruit. Okay. Ooh, I like some of these ideas. Not your grandmother's blueberries. Okay. See, I like that because it's say hello to my dog. He's always my workshop co-presenter, whether I want him to be or not. And his name is Alex. I like some of these ideas. You could take them and just take a different direction on trying to tell that story. What else? Fruitful nutrition. I like the word fruitful because it has multiple meanings. I'm afraid I might have overused that one a few times, but it's a good word. I like nutrition. Healthy eating might be friendlier than nutrition. What else? And Megan, I didn't give people the whole story, so this is about issues overall. Ooh, fresh off the vine. Okay, branch, bramble. Supercharging superfruits with science. I would read that. I would read that. Deborah, do you get to write many headlines in the job that you have, or is it more helping other people with their?
I don't really write too many headlines. Unless you consider publication titles headlines, but they're not really.
Yeah, titles always feel flatter to me because they don't have verbs usually. So
yeah.
You should do more of this. I'm calling you next time I get stuck, by the way.
Okay, it'll use a different part of my creative brain.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to being able to stand in somebody's doorway really soon and do that. Okay. What could we do about phytochemicals, polyphenols, those kinds of technical words? Is there a simple way? Savor summer's bounty. Okay. And I'm asking that one because I don't have a ready answer about phytochemicals or polyphenols. I think for something like that, I've seen things by color. But if you could give an example of like the nutrients that are hiding in your farmer's market food or something like that, or in the produce. Slow aging the tasty way. Oh. Amping up antioxidants, that's good, that's good. Alliteration is a powerful thing, okay. Yeah, so you could try an anecdotal lead, you could try, you know, when this little boy eats his blueberries, he doesn't know it, but his mom is making sure he gets these nutrients that he needs to grow. And I don't know if blueberries work on your brain or if they help your immune system or what their main benefits are, but you might be able to not use those technical words, accurate but technical words, by talking about the health benefits themselves and doing it by color. Might be a fun way to do it, especially if you could come up with a good graphic.
I just did a quick Google because while I sort of knew what a phytochemical is, I didn't exactly know. And there's this website called adaptogens.com. And it lists like what all these phytochemicals, I guess, do. Like it says, alkaloids are nitrogen containing basic compounds, glycosides are substances which sugar residues are attached. So I'm just wondering if the story explains, if the story makes it really clear what that particular chemical does, you could refer to that in the headline. So like, for example, let's see, what's one of these? Silica, it says it's separable from plant material by distillation. So you could say something about distillation in the headline, or, you know, distills, or just, I don't know, just something that connects to what that chemical does, as long as it's explained or played off like in the lead, probably.
I think it depends on the audience. That's not going to get me to read the story, even if I can find out more, and it's also going to make me click away. So let me share I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's a famous science writing book, and the author runs a science writing program at one of the major universities. But have you ever heard of something called the Poisoner's Handbook? Crazy title, right? I mean, sounds like something criminal or something that you shouldn't be reading. In reality, it combines organic chemistry, forensic science, and history in New York City. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most interesting science writing book I've ever had the pleasure to read. And they take all these different compounds that my daughter had to study in organic chemistry all summer long, by the way, and they break them down with a story. Like they talk about prohibition and that kind of alcohol, and how they tried to keep people from drinking it by adding poisons to it and what happened. They talk about things like arsenic that was used in a lot of beauty products before we knew what it would do. So if you get a chance, it is possible to write about things even like organic chemistry in a really interesting way. I never thought that that would be accessible to me or interesting to me, but worth doing. So keep an inspiration board around too, or keep a little idea file where if you see something and you're thinking, oh, well, maybe we could do our version of that. And we could put the NC State or my department or my facilities stamp on this kind of work. And we can talk about what piece of that we're doing or how that's affecting North Carolina. So just food for thought. Okay. I think we're about out of time. I'm sorry about that. But what I'd like to offer to do, if it's of interest to you guys, is to collect these ideas. We'll save the chat and we'll put them in a Google document and share a link with you. And that way, if you have an idea tomorrow after you've slept on it or at another time, you can go ahead and share that with Megan. And Margaret, if you want to send us a headline, I know you had a couple in mind, we can put that in the document too, and we can do some brainstorming for her. Okay. I think it's absolutely possible. I'm sorry that we're in the virtual world to do this. It would be much more fun sitting around the table from you all, but I think you've got some great ideas and examples, and everybody here has obviously got a lot of creative ideas that can be used in headlines and teasers and in stories. So don't underestimate your own creativity, especially when you crowdsource with some friends. And thank you so much for coming today. I really enjoyed spending time with you.
Thanks so much, Dylan, and thanks everybody for coming. On to next month, we are going to circle back up on July 15th at 10 a.m. and hear from Chris Liotta and possibly our newest video producer, Keishan, on video building from scratch. So again, July 15th at 10 a.m. It's a Thursday. It's a week later than typically because of the July 4th holiday, just trying to steer clear. And we're going to be talking about video building from scratch. So again, thanks everybody for coming today. And again, round of applause for Dylan for leading us through. Take care.
Bye, everyone.